Washington Journal continues.
And we are back with Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky. You're here back at our table. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back on, Greta.
Let's start with this Washington Post poll that came out today. Voters expect big changes, but also they want some compromises. The poll said that only 29% say that Donald Trump, president-elect, has carte blanche to pursue his agenda. Would you call that a mandate? That's less than President Obama had, which was at about 51%.
You know, you can read what you want to into the election results. I think he's got a mandate on a few broad topics. You know, he got over 300 electoral votes. He won big in a lot of states that Republicans haven't won in a long time, and I think he has a mandate for a few things and not for everything. So his main you know, planks of his platform were that he would build a wall. So I expect we had daggone better start building a wall, and then also the repeal of Obamacare. He has to do something there, repeal and replace. And then on trade, you know, he expressed opposition to TPP. So I think he's sort of got a mandate not to pass TPP. And those are sort of the broad things that I think the American people agreed with and that helped him to win those states in the Rust Belt.
He's also talked about infrastructure spending.
Which I'm a big fan of that. I serve on the Infrastructure Committee, Transportation Committee.
Paid maternity leave, tax reform, add the wall. All those things could drive up the debt. You okay in the short term with approving things that would drive up the debt?
No, I came here to drive the debt down, okay? So what I say is, you know, he's not going to balance the budget overnight. And frankly, that's Congress's job to balance the budget. But the question that I've got in my mind is, now that Republicans have all three levers, if you will, the House, the Senate, and the White House, are we going to increase the deficit or decrease the deficit? Now, I think we should be decreasing the deficit. In fact, I'm very concerned, Greta, that in the lame duck session, nearly only 6 weeks after the election, we might actually increase spending. And I'm worried about that. I won't be voting to increase spending. So I don't, you know, I expect the debt to go up some, but the question, you know, under Trump, because he can't in the first day, and Congress certainly can't in the first day. We don't have 60 votes in the Senate. Can't balance the budget on the first day, but will the deficit, will the rate of spending, will the rate of that the debt increases go up or down? I hope it goes down for Republicans' sake, because we can't blow it. This is an opportunity the American people have given us, and we better take it seriously.
Up on Capitol Hill, moments away here from Governor of Indiana, the Vice President-elect Mike Pence arriving to talk to all of you, the Republicans, behind closed doors for your conference meeting. It looks like possibly he's coming to see some activity with the police on Capitol Hill. What do you want to hear from him? What should be his message to all of you, and what would you say back to him?
Well, you know, I was glad when Trump named him as his running mate. And of course, before the election, Trump came and spoke to us on Capitol Hill, and then so did Mike Pence. And Mike Pence really connected, I think, with Congress. When he came and spoke to us. He knows the challenges we face. He knows sort of the parliamentary machinations that go on behind the scenes to make things happen. And what do I want to hear him say? I would like to hear him say that, you know, Congress is a co-equal branch of the government, and that Donald Trump looks forward to working with us. Because here's the other thing. Just because our party is in the White House doesn't mean that we have to quit asserting our constitutional authority for things like whether or not we engage in military conflicts, the power of the purse, the tax reform. Tax reform comes out of Congress. There's only, in fact, it comes out of the House of Representatives. The origination clause in the Constitution says that we are the only body, the House of Representatives, that can raise revenue for the government.
You've been aligned with Senator Rand Paul. You've spent some time in the back of the Senate chamber supporting him on when he's done filibusters. This is the Washington Times this morning that Senator Paul willing to join Democrats to oppose any hawkish picks from the president-elect.
Well, that's a title. I don't know exactly how Senator Paul said it, but it does sound in keeping with his position and my position, which is, you know, we are for defense, but we're not for intervening in every conflict overseas. We're not the world's policeman. And the refreshing thing to me about Donald Trump is that other than Rand Paul in the presidential race, there was really only one other candidate that said, you know what, we're not responsible for paying for all of Europe's defense or all of Asia's defense, and we can't get involved in every conflict, and we shouldn't be involved in a war with Russia. That was actually Senator Paul's platform, and Donald Trump got a lot of Senator Paul's voters in Iowa. I was out there campaigning for Senator Paul in the presidential race, and he got a lot of these voters by taking that tack, which is actually a very populist tack. I mean, it's only here in Washington, D.C. where the drums of war are being beaten continuously. Back in Middle America, we want to make America great again, right? And we have a hard time seeing how bombing other people in countries that seem to have, where we seem to have no vested American interest is going to benefit us. So I think Senator Paul is just sort of helping to bolster President-elect Trump in his promise to be less interventionist. And so I think Senator Paul's got the same concerns that I do, that if you surround yourself with what we would call neoconservatives, then that's the sort of policy you're going to get.
What are some names that you're hearing that you consider neoconservatives?
Well, certainly John Bolton. And I think, you know, that title that you read is in the abstract, but in the specific, I've heard that Senator Paul opposes John Bolton's nomination. And in fact, I believe if just two Republicans were to, because there's only a 2-seat majority in the Senate, were to oppose sort of I wouldn't call it hawkish, I would say somebody that's predisposed to go to war. If 2 Republicans would take that tack, they could probably stop a nomination. And that may be what Senator Paul's talking about there.
Let's get to calls. Rita's been waiting in Greenup, Illinois, Republican. Hi, Rita.
Good morning.
Morning. Go ahead.
Yes, I have some recommendations, for the politicians in office now.
Okay.
And that is, for our foundation of our nation was built on the 10 Commandments. They should bring those back. Even the churches are afraid to teach or talk about them. Get rid of the Saxton curriculum in schools. It is labeling our children stupid and bringing down their self. It's bringing down everything about our children. I could name so much. And stop taking the babies from crib to classrooms. Let them stay home, learn the family and society values. That will make a better person.
All right, Rita. Congressman.
Right. Well, you know, I understood 2 of her 3 or 4 points there and sympathize with them. I find it interesting today in the House of Representatives, we're going to open with a prayer. And if you tried to do that in a school, the teacher or the principal would get in a lot of trouble. Yet we're going to do that right over there in the House of Representatives with all these new freshmen that are going to be sworn in. They're going to, you know, swear on a Bible, most likely. And that's a public institution over there. So, you know, I think those principles that this country were founded on, they're very good principles. And it really is, at the end of the day, Rita is right, it's up to the parents, though, to instill those principles in their children. And so, you know, even if they do go to school early, when they come home, you know, that's your opportunity as a parent to instill those values.
Myra's next. Indianapolis, a Democrat. Hi, Myra.
Hi.
How are you? Go ahead.
Okay, the reason I'm calling is, okay, he said he want to make this great for all America. You know, people need to wake up. This is real. He's not worried about blacks, white, or Mexican, you know, or the poor white trash, you know. So people need to wake up. This is real. That's why all this protesting is going on, because he don't care. you know. And then Kelly, whatever her name, she's crazy, so she needs to shut her mouth.
Okay,
You know.
Myra, I think we heard your point, the point about people being concerned because of the comments that Donald Trump made on the campaign trail. People have said he's a racist, a xenophobe, etc. What could he do, or should he be responsible for bringing this country together and assuaging those fears that people have?
Yeah. Well, I do think it's a president's responsibility to lead by example. And certainly I would like to see Barack Obama say more about the people who are destroying things when they protest and riot. But there's also, you know, an onus on Donald Trump to bring people together. And I think he can. You know, here's something that I know from being in business. I started a company, and Donald Trump's had many companies. You don't survive long, you know, as a CEO or as a manager even, if you don't treat everybody equally and fairly. And I think if you look at the thousands of people that he has employed, I don't think you'll find evidence of racism or bias, because it's bad for business, frankly. And so I think that's why if you go back and look at all the thousands, tens of thousands of people he's employed, he's treated them fairly and without you know, concern for the color of their skin or their religion.
Jeff, Columbia, Missouri, a Republican. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how you doing today?
Morning. Go ahead
Hey,
with your
Jeff.
question or comment.
Okay, my question is the invasion of privacy. What do you guys intend to do about it?
Well, you know, there's some good news this summer on that front. Justin Amash is a colleague of mine who's very concerned about the invasion of privacy, serves in the House. He's from Michigan. I do too. We have something called the Liberty Caucus, not to be confused with the Freedom Caucus. And we focus on issues like privacy, the Fourth Amendment. And we mentioned Senator Paul earlier. He's taken many stands in the Senate. He's done filibusters in the Senate to protect this. But the good news I wanted to share with you this summer is that they tried to expand the Patriot Act. And the reason you didn't hear about this on the news is they tried to slip it by us, too, in Congress. It came up for a voice vote. And what they were going to do is change the wording in the Patriot Act. Right now, it says that banks can report your information to the government if they suspect terrorism or money laundering. Well, they were going to take out the two words terrorism and money laundering and put in the words any crime, any specified crime, which was great concern to us. And they were going to do it on a voice vote. And my friend and colleague Justin Amash got to the floor, demanded a recorded vote. And so the recorded vote had to happen that day. And what happened is the bill failed on a recorded vote. And I didn't see that in the news anywhere, but that's an example of stuff that happens behind the scenes. And it's really sort of, you got to be on your toes parliamentary-wise, because they can slip bills by on a voice vote, but any member of Congress can walk to the floor and demand a recorded vote. I've done it many times. It's 500 yards from my office to the floor, and so we call it the 500-yard dash when I make the run to get to a microphone, because if you get out the Constitution, it says that Congress has to have a quorum to conduct business. Now, there'll be a lot of business conducted over there today without a quorum, and that's only with the acquiescence of all 435 members. So it only takes one member to note the absence of a quorum and demand a recorded vote. And we used that tool earlier or this summer to stop an expansion of the Patriot Act.
Craig is next in Florida, Independent.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Hey, Craig.
How are you? I'm calling in regard to Trump's son-in-law requesting a special clearance for him to be part of meetings or whatever you want to call it. There's pretty straightforward rules about nepotism in this country. I'm just curious where the Republicans stand on this whole idea about his son-in-law becoming part of this inner circle.
What do you think, Congressman?
Well, you know, Hillary was an instrumental part, as I remember, of the White House when Bill Clinton was in there. She had an office. You know, she was literally half of that couple in the White House came up with the first version of Obamacare, if you will. And so I think that Donald Trump is looking for people that he can trust. And if he trusts his son-in-law, I don't think his son-in-law is looking for a paycheck, okay? And that's one thing that I would be concerned about if this were done in order to enhance somebody's bank account or whatnot. But conflicts of interest are a problem if they're not disclosed, if they're kept behind the scenes. But as long as there's public disclosure, then I think you can ameliorate those concerns somewhat.
Debbie's in Florida, a Democrat. Debbie, you are on the air with the congressman.
Yes, I would just like to say that I keep hearing on the news how they're stumped as to why Trump won. Well, I'm just speaking for myself, but I'm a Democrat. I'm liberal all the way, except for one thing. Ronald Reagan in the mid-'80s said, when he signed amnesty for illegal aliens to stay here, he said, and then comprehensive immigration reform. And I have heard that. Every administration, comprehensive immigration reform. Then finally, I would have voted for Hillary because, whatever. But then Trump, Trump, his platform, all of a sudden, he said, I'm going to address illegal aliens. And I just flipped. I voted Republican all down the ticket to help him get his thing across. And that is why, stop scratching your heads as to why some of us have jumped out of the Democratic, arena and gone for Donald Trump.
Okay,
What
Debbie.
state? What state is
She is
Debbie
Florida.
from?
Mhm.
Okay, Debbie. Well, and your vote was consequential in Florida. In Kentucky, we saw the same thing. A lot of Democrats voted for Donald Trump. In fact, there are more registered Democrats in Kentucky than there are Republicans. But as you have, I think, they feel like their party has abandoned them. And we saw this in Kentucky with the working class. It seemed like Hillary Clinton was not appealing to the working class, yet Donald Trump was. And in fact, in Kentucky, a lot of people did, like you did, Debbie, a lot of Democrats, if you will, they voted Republican straight ticket. And what happened, and I think it was a reasonable thing to do if your principles don't line up with one party to vote for another party, regardless of your registration. But what happened in Kentucky, because of the Democrats who crossed the ballot and voted Republican, is that the state house changed from Republican or Democrat control. The Democrats controlled the state house in Kentucky 53 to 47. Well, 17 incumbent Democrats lost in Kentucky in the state house, and so now it's 64-37 in Kentucky. There's a Republican supermajority, and that's simply because the Democrat Party used to be strong in Kentucky, but they, my constituents, whether they're Republican or Democrat, really feel abandoned by the Democrats in Washington, D.C. And that goes particularly like on the issues of coal or guns, or as I think it was Rita that said earlier on religion.
Lawrence, Elk Grove Village, Illinois, Republican. Hi there.
Good morning. Yeah,
Good
I have
morning.
a few comments for Thomas for C-SPAN if I have time, hopefully. My comment is I think you guys in the Republicans Congress are in a tough spot because of all your diversity, actually. But you got to be careful not to parse words with Trump or whatever in terms of who he picks, because no matter who he picks, the Democrats are going to find fault with, because there's so many, phobias and isms and everything else that they're going to label somebody something. But you guys got to be careful, because you're actually the diverse party. The Democrats are the diverse party, but I hate to say it, it's only skin deep. And my wife of 34 years is actually Hispanic and African American, and she voted for Trump. I did not. But the Democrats, there's no diversity there. If you recall, I think there was one guy who came out strongly against the Iranian deal that Obama's administration came up with, and I think his name was Melendez, and I don't think you haven't heard him anymore. He's gone. They silenced him, kind of. But you got to be careful on the words that you use. You know, when you talk about people that are predisposed to war.
Okay, so Lawrence, I think he was referring to Senator Bob Menendez.
Well, at first I thought he was talking about don't go after Trump's picks over political correctness, because I've seen that. And what I've been telling people in the past couple days who are upset with some of Trump's nominees for political correctness reasons, I say political correctness was on the ballot on November 8th to some degree, and it lost. Because if you can't say that Donald Trump was politically correct. I mean, that was one of the endearing things, I think, about him to some of the middle class.
You don't have concerns, though, with Steve Bannon being seen by the alt-right as one of their leaders, you know, white supremacy, et cetera, that has been put on the Breitbart webpage that he ran. You don't have any concerns with him being in the White House and the message that that sends?
I don't have concerns with Stephen Bannon. When I've heard him on talk radio, he seems like a very well-grounded individual, very logical thinker, and I was glad when, in fact, he joined Trump's campaign. So no, I'm not piling on there. In fact, that's the exact example I was referring to, is that political correctness was on the ballot and political correctness lost. And so now, don't expect political correctness for about 4 years. And then, but I think his point was, before he got off the line there at the end, was more specifically about John Bolton or some of the nominations. You know, Senator Paul's concern, I think, with John Bolton, and my concern with John Bolton is not that we oppose Donald Trump, it's that what we've witnessed here in Washington, D.C. is that good people come here, or people get elected on a platform, and then if they surround themselves with people who don't support that platform, then they end up doing things that weren't what they campaigned on. And so what we've seen with John Bolton, for example, is here's a guy whose past statements, and I'm not talking about political correctness, I'm talking about his policies, his ideology, is very different from the ideology that we've seen Donald Trump express, not just during the campaign, but during his lifetime. And so we're just looking out for, for Donald Trump, if you will, and the people who vested their trust in him on his platform.
You also have said about the leadership up on Capitol Hill for House Republicans, because of Paul Ryan and before that his Speaker John Boehner, predecessor, that they've caused a constitutional crisis.
Yes,
what do you mean by that?
In many regards, they've caused a constitutional crisis, and just because we won the election doesn't mean that's gone away. Look, over here on Capitol Hill, we're just a few hundred yards from the Capitol. They're wallpapering over all of the differences and all of the problems inside of the House of Representatives. And that's okay, but eventually these issues need to be addressed. So let me give you an example of a constitutional crisis. We haven't had a declaration of war or an authorization for the use of military force since 2002, 2003. We've gone almost 15 years now without Congress weighing in on the issue of whether or not to engage our military in various things around the world. Yet, how many conflicts have the presidents engaged us in? And so, you know, Walter Jones, who's a congressman from North Carolina, is very good on the Constitution. He has sent multiple letters and requests publicly to Speaker Boehner and now to Paul Ryan to let us have a debate on this issue of whether to engage our military. Win or lose, you know, we may lose. We are for less intervention overseas. But the debate needs to be had because the Constitution only authorizes Congress. It doesn't authorize the executive branch to engage our forces overseas militarily. That's an important thing that Founding Fathers put in there, because Madison, you know, in his letters to Jefferson, said the executive branch is the one that is most prone to go to war. And so that's an example of a constitutional crisis, but one that might appeal to more people is the fact that we're not exercising our power of the purse. The way this town has worked and the way funding for the federal government has worked for the last decade, or maybe 2 decades, is the Speaker of the House rolls down here to Pennsylvania Avenue and asks the President what he wants and what he'll take and what he'll agree to. Then he rolls back up here to Congress and tells 434 other members, hey, this is what we got. Here's what you're going to vote on. We're not going to debate it. You've got 2 days to read it, and it's called an omnibus. And that presents a constitutional crisis, because now you've subverted the people's house and the ability for 435 congressional districts to be represented.
Why not try to stop Paul Ryan from becoming Speaker? After the election, you said he didn't have your vote, but he was approved unanimously for Speaker.
Well, John Boehner was approved unanimously too, and 9 months later he was gone. That election that happened day before yesterday is a show vote, and it's behind closed doors. And by the way, you have, if you wanted to oppose the Speaker in that election, you had 24 hours to campaign. Can you imagine if a Republican in the House of Representatives 6 months ago started a spirited campaign against the Speaker of the House? Everybody would be mad at that person, because they'd say, you're going to cost us the election, there's going to be all this division, and you'll cost us a majority in the Senate. That person would be persona non grata in the party. So the accepted wisdom is that if you want to run for Speaker, you have to start the first day we get back after the election. And then, oh, surprise, surprise, the election happens 24 hours later. So there were some of us on the House, and I'm not a member of the Freedom Caucus, but the Freedom Caucus was for delaying the Speaker election so that we could, and by the way, the Democrats have decided to do that. But we asked to delay the election for Speaker so that there could be a chance to have the debate and not just paper over these differences and pretend that somebody got all the votes in the room, which he did not.
How many votes did he lose?
You know, I left the room when the vote happened, and so did some of my colleagues. So
how many left the room?
I'm not at liberty to say, and there are many doors to go out of that room. But there were a few of us that left the room and did not vote. But look, there needs to be a real election for Speaker. You can't just have this 24-hour show vote, and because that's what happened day before yesterday.
All right, Sonia in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, Democrat.
Yes, I would so thankful to have the chance to speak with a representative from Kentucky, and
I'm honored to get to speak to somebody from Harrodsburg. Thank you, Sonia.
Oh, well, all right. Well, thank you. I want to talk about Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
All politics are local, and
yes.
Toyota came here, and and it was great. It was great. They gave good jobs, good benefits, and now they are making record-breaking profits. Record-breaking profits. In the meantime, they are cutting benefits for their employees. They are not hiring full-time employees anymore. They're going through the Kelly Workforce Services and for temporary hires. And then those people have an option to finally get on to work, and then they can wait 10 more years to get up to that benefit. And this comes back down to, well, now the city of Georgetown is hurting for tax revenues that would have came from these.
Sonia, and I'm going to jump in at that point just because our time is short with the congressman. The House is gaveling in early this morning at 9 a.m., but I think you gather what she's talking about.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Sonia, and thanks for calling from Kentucky. Toyota has been a boon to Kentucky, really has. They make the Toyota Camry in Scott County, which is Georgetown, Kentucky, which is not in my district. It's in Congressman Andy Barr's district, but I have a lot of people in my district who work for Toyota. And I would just say, you know, to the extent that we here in Washington, D.C. have done anything to cause the concerns that Sonia has, hopefully we can undo those things so that Toyota is incentivized you know, in a different way. But I think they have been a great employer to Kentucky. I'd love to move them into my congressional district from Andy Barr's congressional district. But, and they have been providing a tax base there in Georgetown. Maybe it's not as much as Sonia would like, but it has been instrumental into building parks and schools and whatnot there, and more transportation infrastructure in Georgetown. And we got a lot more restaurants there too.
Well, Congressman, we always appreciate your time and your willingness to talk to our viewers, so thank you so much. Come back again.
Thanks, Greta. Look forward to seeing Mike Pence on the Hill today.
Yeah, we'll let you go so you can get up there for that meeting.
All right.